They say you shouldn't get too attached to your work, but after 7 years building something from the ground up, nurturing it line by line, refining it through failure and iteration, and watching it mature into the backbone of an international operation, detachment becomes a fantasy. My name is Anna, and for close to a decade, my professional life revolved around a system called Ocelot. It was never flashy. No sleek UI meant to impress executives at first glance, but it was formidable in ways that mattered. A layered KPI framework that began as a temporary fix for a handful of regional offices and quietly evolved into the engine driving a $45 million global logistics agreement. I didn't just contribute to it, I conceived it, built it, and grew it. Every core function, every predictive model, every alert that fired before disaster struck carried my logic inside it. I wasn't hidden in the shadows either. I stood in front of rooms explaining it, trained entire departments to use it, and logged in at 3 in the morning when deployments went sideways. My work didn't merely support the company, it steered it. At least, that's what I believed then. When the previous CEO stepped down, I allowed myself a cautious sense of hope. The incoming leader, Max Benson, arrived with polish and reputation, Harvard pedigree, TED-style charisma, the kind of executive who spoke fluently about transformation and momentum. I'd read enough to know he wasn't deeply technical, but that wasn't unusual. What unsettled me was how quickly he dismissed what didn't fit neatly into his worldview. Still, I trusted structure, logic, and preparation, so when I finally scheduled a meeting to discuss a raise and a formal promotion that had been casually promised under the old leadership, I came armed with facts, a concise deck, clear ROI, performance metrics from 2 quarters, a forward-looking integration plan. Max welcomed me with that overly perfect smile. He praised my contributions, nodded along as I walked him through efficiency gains, client retention tied directly to Ocelot's capabilities, and early warning mechanisms that had averted multiple failures. He listened, he even took notes. Then he leaned back, folded his hands, and said the words I felt coming before he finished the sentence. What I'd done was impressive, truly, but the timing wasn't right. The organization was restructuring, roles were being reviewed. It wasn't about me, he said, it was about the process. I asked whether this was a delay or a decision. He called it a realignment, a word meant to sound neutral, but felt final. I nodded, thanked him, and walked out carrying a calm expression while something sharp twisted behind my ribs. It didn't feel like not now, it felt like not you. The hallway was lined with glossy posters celebrating innovation and empowerment, and I tasted the irony as I passed them. Back at my desk, I stared at my terminal, replaying his reassurance on a loop. Then the email arrived, early the next morning. A vague calendar invite, reorganization briefing, no context, no explanation, just enough ambiguity to raise dread. When I entered the conference room, Max was already there with HR. The atmosphere was clinical, efficient. The words came quickly. Structural review, streamlining leadership. Effective immediately, I would be moved into an advisory position. Same salary, same title for now, but execution and decisions would be handled by someone new, Melissa Gordon. The same Melissa who once asked me to explain load balancing in emojis, the same one who had dismissed the architecture as overcomplicated charts and crashed a test server by skipping staging. I said nothing. There was nothing that would change the outcome. By the time I returned to my desk, the announcement was live. Melissa Gordon appointed head of global KPI strategy. Her leadership praised, her vision celebrated. A photo of her standing in front of a framework I had drawn, presented, defended. My name absent, not even buried in fine print. I stayed quiet as the office buzzed around me. The substitution was silent and complete. Later that week, the auditorium filled for a company-wide presentation. Max took the stage, speaking proudly about innovation, about transformation. He introduced Melissa as the mind behind the system, Applause roared, slides flashed. My graphs, my logic, my structure. Nothing altered except the credit. Then I noticed the file name in the corner of the slide. My name, still there, tucked into metadata no one else would notice. Everyone watched the screen. No one saw me. I didn't react. I didn't interrupt. I let the moment pass. When the applause faded and people drifted out with coffee and compliments, I returned to my desk. Habit, not loyalty, guided me. I logged in, scanning the architecture I knew better than my own reflection, my hands resting above the keyboard, still and steady. My fingers hovered over the keys, not typing, just remembering. 3 years ago, when our infrastructure had started to creak under its own weight, I pitched a solution, a new platform, NutraFrame, that could support real-time KPIs at scale, stabilize forecasting models, and reduce system latency. The finance team said it was too expensive. Leadership said it was a nice idea. So I bought the license myself. I didn't tell anyone, not to be a martyr, but because I couldn't afford to let the system collapse. We were weeks away from a critical deployment. I fronted the cost, registered the license in my name, and installed the base framework on a Saturday while the building sat empty and the servers hummed in quiet obedience. I had almost forgotten about that. Almost, until now. I opened the license panel, and there it was. NutraFrame Enterprise Developer License, registered owner, Anna Emvo, status, active, auto-renews March 2026. 3 years later, the entire company, Melissa's revolutionary system, the dashboards Max praised, the forecasts they sold to investors, still ran on my license, my signature, my digital spine. They had erased me from the leadership roster, cut me out of strategy meetings, paraded my work under someone else's name, but they hadn't touched the bones. They couldn't because the foundation didn't belong to them, it belonged to me. I sat back, the screen glowing in the dim light of early afternoon. Around me, the office buzzed with the usual hum of productivity. Emails, Slack pings, celebratory lunch plans for Melissa. No one noticed what I was doing. No one thought to look. They had pushed me out of the story, but they forgot the most important rule about systems. The story doesn't end at the surface. It runs in the code, and the code was still mine. I didn't rush. That's not how systems fall apart. Destruction is easy. Anyone can yank cables, delete files, corrupt databases. But deception? Deception is an art, and I was a master of it. The next morning, I came in early, earlier than usual, even for me. The office was still quiet, lights dim, just the cleaning crew whispering on another floor and the low hum of machines waking up. I sat at my terminal, sipped stale coffee, and opened the code. Not Melissa's version, mine, the original, the bones. I started with the indicator logic. It was robust, designed to flag even subtle inconsistencies in lead conversions, customer churn, and supply volatility. But now I rewrote the weighting, gently, subtly. Instead of pulling from 7 variables, I trimmed it to 4. Instead of rewarding balance and healthy long-term metrics, I biased it toward flash metrics, volume surges, API traffic bursts, short-term engagement spikes. The result? Everything would look beautiful, inflated, gleaming, but wrong. The forecast would drift by 10 to 12%, enough to sow chaos over time, but not enough to spark immediate suspicion. Not yet. Then I moved to the alert layer. Originally, our alert framework was surgical, catching anomalies before humans even knew there was a problem. But now I neutered it. I disabled 2 major triggers, error propagation and performance lag, and rewrote their callbacks to push soft messages, review pending instead of critical alert. I replaced urgency with ambiguity. No red flags, no pop-ups, just quiet compliance. The system wouldn't scream anymore, it would smile. By noon, I had tested the new build in a mirror environment. Every graph looked immaculate. Client growth charts showed a steady upward climb. Conversion ratios glittered. Forecast reliability sat at a smug 97.8%. And none of it was real. It was the illusion of control dressed in dashboards and PowerPoint slides, a cathedral of numbers with hollow foundations. I didn't touch production, not yet. I waited, observed, prepared, because sabotage was never the goal. I wasn't trying to burn anything down. I wanted them to worship a lie. So when it finally cracked, and it would, they'd have no idea where the rot began. They'd search logs, blame servers, question vendor updates, but they'd never suspect that the flaw was in the perfection itself, and they'd never think to ask the one person who knew every secret layer of the code, because to them, I was just the advisor now, a relic, a shadow, but shadows see everything. The auditorium was packed again, this time for the Q3 review. Laughter floated over the rows of chairs like champagne bubbles. People wore their best business-casual smiles. The energy was sharp with success. "Record-breaking quarter," someone whispered near me. "Melissa's team is killing it," came another voice, full of admiration and ignorance. The lights dimmed, the projector glowed, and Melissa stepped on stage, back straight, heels precise, face framed by carefully styled hair. She was dressed like power, navy, and confidence, and the crowd leaned in like a congregation awaiting scripture. Behind her, the screen exploded with metrics. Plus 19.3% client retention, plus 22% efficiency gains, forecast accuracy 97.8%. It was immaculate, flawless, beautiful, and entirely false. I watched from my usual spot in the middle row, eyes steady, mouth neutral. Applause thundered around me as Melissa clicked through slide after slide of success, all generated by a system that no longer warned about late shipments, inventory discrepancies, or risk variance, because I had turned those alarms off. They weren't seeing success, they were seeing silence. They clapped for graphs polished to shine, but rooted in misinformation. And behind the curtain, the drift was already beginning. Minor delivery delays, misaligned projections, unsynced dashboards. Not chaos, not yet, but it was coming, like a hairline crack in glass that no one notices until it shatters under weight. Max Benson, the CEO, took the stage next. Let's give another round of applause to Melissa Gordon for her extraordinary leadership in transforming our performance systems. More clapping. Some people stood. I didn't. Max continued, smiling like a man who thought he'd won something. What we're seeing now is just the beginning. This quarter's profitability has surged beyond expectations. And the best part? No major issues. Not a single escalation in 3 months. That's what I call bulletproof strategy. I almost laughed. Of course there were no escalations. The system couldn't report them anymore. It was like bragging your house never caught fire right after you disabled all the smoke detectors. As the presentation wrapped, I slipped away quietly, not because I couldn't stomach the applause, but because I had something else to confirm. For weeks, a suspicion had been crawling at the back of my mind. Melissa's promotion, her rapid rise, the casual confidence with which she had taken credit for work she didn't understand. It didn't add up until now. A conversation in the break room, a careless mention from the finance team, and one late-night search through old server logs and meeting itineraries confirmed it. Max and Melissa had been traveling together far more than necessary. Off-site meetings, private strategy sessions, and out-of-nowhere executive off-site in Santorini that hadn't included any other department heads. Melissa wasn't just the lead strategist, she was the CEO's mistress. Suddenly, everything made sense. The unearned authority, the protected silence, the reason her ignorance had been reframed as fresh thinking. It was never about the system, it was about power, and they thought they'd won. I returned to my desk and opened the system once more. The dashboard glowed green, so calm, so confident. I knew better. The house was already on fire, and no one could hear the alarms anymore. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon. The office buzzed with its usual rhythm: muted calls, the clack of keyboards, a sales team laughing too loudly by the elevators. I sat at my desk, invisible in plain sight, reviewing logs from the predictive engine, my engine, though no one called it that anymore. Then came a ping, a message request on my private LinkedIn from someone who shouldn't have been contacting me. Paniar, VP of Operations, Northbridge Health. We had worked closely for years. I still remembered her straightforward style, her meticulous feedback, and how she once called the system a crystal ball with teeth. Her message was short, precise. "Hi, Anna. I know you're technically not the point of contact anymore, but something's wrong. The system feels off."
Lagged alerts. Data drift. This doesn't look like your work. Are you still involved? My breath caught. They noticed. I didn't reply. Not yet. I couldn't. Not without risking more than just awkward questions. But the moment I saw her words, I knew what was coming. The illusion was cracking. A week later, it happened. The company-wide email came mid-morning, sent from the legal department, stamped with urgency and corporate regret. Subject: Client Account Status, Northbridge Health. The message was formal, sterile. Effective immediately, Northbridge Health is suspending their analytics contract with us. Renewal for Q4 has been canceled. That contract, just under $8 million. The office froze. Conversations stopped. People hovered around screens like spectators at a crime scene. There were whispers, confusion, low-voiced speculation. The system had shown everything as fine. No alerts, no flags. Forecasts had shown 98% confidence just last week, but deliveries were late. Inventory mismatches were multiplying. The forecast had failed, and suddenly, trust evaporated. But here's the thing. No one said Melissa's name, not once. In the war room meeting later that day, I watched from the back row as executives danced around the truth. Unexpected client behavior, logistical misalignment. We'll audit the delivery pipeline. Max sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. Melissa sat beside him, flipping through a printout like a detached observer, nodding thoughtfully while others tried to explain the fallout she had helped create. Not a word of blame, not a breath of accountability. The system was wrong, but the illusion was still intact, for now. What they didn't understand was that Northbridge wasn't the problem. Northbridge was the beginning, the first crack in a facade built on my stolen foundation. And when the others came, and they would, there'd be no hiding, because once trust is broken, it doesn't just collapse, it echoes. The consultant's name was Ken Albright, silver hair, expensive glasses, calm voice. He arrived on a Monday with a sleek laptop, a leather notebook, and the air of a man used to fixing things, cleaning up after other people's messes. System audit, back-end structure, predictive logic mapping, he said, shaking hands in the glass conference room. Shouldn't take more than a few days. That was before he opened the code. I watched from my desk, quietly tethered to the periphery of the chaos. No one formally included me in the meetings. I was, after all, just an advisor. But the moment Ken began digging into the core architecture, I could feel the friction. By the second day, his tone had changed. "I'm trying to trace the forecasting logic tree," he said to Melissa, standing in front of her monitor. "But there are hidden references I can't map, functions within functions, layered modules without standard documentation." Melissa gave an exaggerated sigh. "Yeah, Anna built it that way. She made it too complicated." Ken raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe," he said, "she was just too smart." Melissa blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or a correction. Ken scrolled again. "This isn't messy. It's elegant. Obscure, yes, but deliberate. You don't hide logic like this unless you're thinking 5 steps ahead." From across the room, I fought a smile. It was mine. Every embedded sequence, every internal redundancy, every recursive function. They had erased my name, stripped my title, handed the crown to someone who couldn't even follow the footprints I left behind. But they still couldn't escape the truth. The system might have looked like Melissa's now, but it spoke in my language. I watched as Ken tilted his head at the screen, fingers pausing over the keys like someone trying to read a dialect no one had taught him. He didn't look frustrated, he looked intrigued. "This isn't a normal architecture," he muttered. "It's defensive, predictive, like it's alive." Melissa tried to steer him back to surface metrics, smiling too brightly, pretending she understood what any of it meant. But her discomfort showed in every fidget, every glance toward Max's office, every forced nod. They had built their reputation on a castle of glass, and now the man they brought in to protect it couldn't even find the front door. And I sat quietly because I didn't need to say a word. The code was already speaking for me. I'd never cared about office gossip. I had always kept my world small. Code, system performance, client deliverables. The math made sense. People didn't. But now I needed people. Or rather, what they whispered when they thought no one was listening. I started paying attention. It began with travel receipts, little red flags buried in the finance folder where Melissa's name kept appearing alongside Max Benson's Executive Strategy Retreat, Leadership Sync, Aspen Lodge, each one booked under different departments, billed under vague codes, but always just the two of them. Then came the calendar entries. Melissa had access to Max's private calendar, not just the public-facing version, the real one. I caught a glimpse one afternoon when she forgot to lock her screen. Back-to-back meetings in off-site locations with no other attendees listed. Review alignment strategy, pulse, all conveniently titled, all empty of substance. There were rumors, too, from Sarah in operations, who once caught them laughing in the CEO's car after an off-site coaching session, and from Dario in IT, who said Melissa had been granted security clearance in her first 2 months, clearance it took others years to earn. And then there was the photo, an Instagram story posted and quickly deleted by one of the junior sales reps at a rooftop party. Melissa laughing in a cocktail dress, Max behind her, hand on her waist, closer than any boss should be. I screenshotted it before it disappeared. Just like that, the pieces began to line up. Her rise, her untouchable status, the reason no one questioned her disastrous decisions, why Max defended her even when clients pulled contracts. It wasn't just favoritism, it was leverage. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't print the receipts or leak the photos. Not yet.
But I archived everything. Screenshots, logs, expense reports, a little folder hidden deep in my personal drive encrypted titled something innocuous. Legacy Audit Q4. Let them keep clapping for their golden girl. Let her sit in meetings she didn't understand, rewriting my work into buzzwords she barely pronounced. I wasn't trying to expose her, I was waiting for the moment when exposing her would matter most. Because revenge isn't loud, it's patient, and I had all the time in the world. The boardroom was colder than usual. A late autumn chill had crept in through the glass panels, but no one mentioned it. They were too busy preparing for what was expected to be a victory lap. Melissa stood confidently at the front, flanked by a glassy deck projected on the massive screen. Max sat nearby, legs crossed, smiling with the smug stillness of a man who believed the storm had passed. "Let's dive into this quarter's success metrics," Melissa began, clicking to the first slide. Bars soared upward in shades of green and blue, each one more triumphant than the last. As you can see, client satisfaction is at an all-time high. Forecast accuracy remains above 97%. Then it happened. A soft gray line scrolled across the bottom of the screen. At first it seemed like a formatting glitch, but the words were unmistakable. "This data has been optimized. It is not real. Ask who changed the core." A sharp inhale echoed from the far side of the table. Melissa froze, hands still on the clicker. Max leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What is that?" he muttered. The line didn't disappear. It repeated. A director reached for his phone. An alert. He opened his inbox. An automated message from the system itself had just arrived. Same line, same font. This data has been optimized. It is not real. Ask who changed the core. Is this a joke? One board member asked, turning sharply. Is this a test? Melissa stammered, clicking frantically. It must be a formatting error, some legacy code from an old dev environment. Maybe legacy code, another director snapped. You've been presenting this architecture as your creation for months. Ken Albright, the consultant, stood slowly from his seat near the back. That message isn't a bug. It's embedded, triggered only during executive-level presentations. Someone left it deep in the system intentionally. Max shot up from his chair. Can we scrub it? No, Ken said. It's tied to the core logic. You'd need the original architect to untangle it. Silence. And then from Martin Cross, the sharp-eyed director in the cream suit. Who is Anna, and why isn't she in this room? The room turned toward Max, then Melissa. Neither spoke, because no one could. The truth was suddenly too loud to ignore. My name, my eraser, had just punched through the silence with surgical precision. Not in anger, not in noise, in code, in undeniable proof that beneath every shiny graph and inflated number, there was a ghost in the machine, and her name was Anna. They called me in, a rushed email from the director's office marked urgent. No pleasantries, no pretense, just a request. Please report to the 11th floor conference room immediately. I knew the moment had come. When I walked in, the air was thick with unease. Melissa sat stiffly at the head of the table, her polished demeanor cracking beneath a nervous smile. Max stood off to the side, jaw clenched, arms crossed. Around the table, board members stared at me like I was the final piece of a puzzle they hadn't wanted to solve. Miss Venno, Martin Cross began, his voice clipped but respectful, we'd appreciate your clarity on the current system integrity concerns. I nodded, calm, controlled. I opened my laptop and projected a copy of the live system interface. Then I walked them through it line by line, the rewired variables, the reduced forecast inputs, the stripped early warning logic, the buried alerts. The system, I said, voice even, was altered to favor cosmetic gains. The data looks good because it was designed to hide what's wrong. Forecasts have been off by 10 to 12% for weeks. That's why Northbridge Health pulled out, and more will follow. I clicked once more. Melissa's changelog appeared. Time-stamped entries, her user credentials, the precise moments she implemented edits without understanding their impact. And the person who made these changes, I added, turning slightly, was Melissa Gordon. Silence. Max opened his mouth to protest, but didn't get the chance. A voice rose from the speaker at the far end of the table. Pon from Northbridge was on the line. I just want to be clear, she said. Our Q4 budget previously allocated to your company is now being redirected to Anna Verano. She'll be leading our independent analytics development moving forward, effective immediately. There was a long, stunned pause. No one moved. No one clapped. I closed my laptop, unplugged the cable, and turned to leave. Then I stopped, reached into my bag, and slid a single manila folder onto the table. Before I go, I said, you should know why Melissa was given this position in the first place. Inside were travel receipts, calendar entries, private messages, and that one photograph from the rooftop party. I didn't speak further. I didn't have to. The board leaned in. Melissa went pale. Max didn't even try to stop me. I walked out without looking back. No fanfare, no exit interview, no forced smiles, just the sound of a door closing behind me and the silence of a room realizing exactly who they had underestimated. The system was no longer theirs, and neither was I. 2 days later, I sat in a glass-walled office overlooking the city. Not a borrowed desk, not a dim corner of someone else's empire. Mine. The contract from Northbridge was already signed. They didn't just offer me a role, they offered me a future. Double the salary, full technical autonomy, no micromanagement, no middlemen, no interference, just a team of sharp, curious people who wanted to learn, not steal, and most importantly, respect. They didn't want me to simplify brilliance into buzzwords. They didn't want me to shrink to fit a title. They didn't even want me to justify my worth. They'd seen it. They knew. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to fight for my place at the table. I was building the table, and this time the system would carry my name at the core. Not in a hidden file name, not in the metadata, not in someone else's presentation, but in every layer of code, in every clean, honest, quietly powerful line. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a beginning, and it was mine.